Hi, my name is Dan DeLue, and I'm the visual effects supervisor for Garfield.
Hi, my name's Carl Herbst. I'm the digital effects supervisor for Garfield.
And I just wanted to welcome everybody to the expanded commentary.
I got you!
What you're looking at now is basically the kind of what the animator will see when they're working on the shot. They're actually able to see the background plate behind their animation.
Another thing to note while watching this is Garfield's face is very expressive, and he has a lot of different kind of poses he'll do just with his face of oohs and ahs. Like, there's a nice one right there, with an open mouth, the ears back. You know, this kind of shape here, we could have done the same way we would do the body, but to make sure we could get a face that we always liked, we made sure that each of the faces matched something actually we found in the original Garfield 2D drawings. These kind of oohs and stuff like that mark up these cheeks. And the way his mouth is in there and his chin, you can go to any Garfield comic and probably find a pose that's pretty close to that to make a character really feel alive. The most important thing is his eyes, and we spent a lot of time making Garfield's eyes, you know, to get these little highlights in the bottom. And also you can see here barely, but you can actually kind of feel the sky up in here just a little bit. And there's a sidewalk out here because this was actually shot on location. And we took a picture of that location so we can reflect that into his eyes, again, to help him really feel like he was there. So when we were on set, somewhere right about here, they would take a picture and look in all different directions to be able to see what was going on in the set, coming toward us. So that way we knew that, you know, the sun was somewhere up over here, as Dan was saying, and that they might have had a fill light over here that was filling in the back of him so that this area wouldn't get too dark.
Why has this happened? I was the one. It was all about me. Not
So
about...
what we've got coming up is a kind of a split screen between the original background plate and then basically the final composite. So you can kind of see where we start and where we end up, and you kind of see just how, you know, empty, you know, the overall shot is until Garfield gets put in there, and you can kind of see the flag and everything up in the corner. So let me just kind of run through this real quick and just kind of show you the different pieces. Something else I'll think about too is when we're actually photographing everything. We talked about Garfield not being there. When I actually go back and edit the movie, they don't have a Garfield until, you know, we generate animatics or actually put shots together for them. So it's something that's really hard for them to actually put the movie together until they get Garfield in place. But you can see as Garfield is actually coming through the door here, you can see the kind of the split on this side versus this side. There's no Garfield coming through the door, so that was all done with practical effects opening the door. As you guys see Garfield come across the floor, you kind of see where the reflections are over here on this side, and they haven't been put in yet on this side. You can also see where, you know, where these table legs were. You didn't have any reflection yet in the table, and as Garfield comes past, you're actually seeing Garfield reflected in the actual table legs as he comes across. And kind of a little cheat for everybody, Garfield renders, with all the hair on Garfield renders very slowly. The cheat for reflections, like in the floor itself and in the table legs, is we didn't actually grow the hairs on those pieces. It was actually the versions where you see it's just the hairless Garfield. If you look close in some of the shots, you actually see the Garfield in the reflections doesn't have any hair, but because it's not really a mirror reflection, it's something that's pretty soft. We go in and kind of blur it. You don't really notice that Garfield has no hair in his reflections unless you're looking for it. One of the odd things about Garfield, you can see this and like definitely look at some of the close-ups, is basically when you're dealing with animation, you'll get a lot of emotion from eyebrows, but Garfield's eyes are so big, he doesn't actually have eyebrows, so you'll watch the actual shape of his eyelids. They're actually changing to convey his emotion. So you like see through this point here, you know, a lot of times Garfield, you know, he has these flat eyes basically. You know, that's kind of the signature Garfield shot, whereas he's got these, you know, flat eyelids. With a shot like this, you know, we actually went in and like changed the shapes of the eyelids, so we got kind of more of a frown on the top of the eyes. So, you know, none of this area moved up here because he actually has no eyebrows, but you know, we actually got the same kind of motion by changing the shapes of his eyelids. So you kind of watch through there, he's got into that frown, you know, kind of this little curled frown coming off his eyelid. And then you can definitely see he's got Yeah, you can definitely see it there.
Very angry look.
Very angry look, yeah. It's just another way of like be able to convey emotion through the character.
It's liver flavored.
Mmm, delicious.
What you're looking at here is just a background plate. We shot this with no Garfield. Basically had when we planned it out the first time, we had basically a stuffed animal that sat right there. And for John, we rehearsed the shot for Breckenmeyer. And for the camera people, we rehearsed the shot. So when the first time through, basically with that stuffed animal there, Brecken was able to remember that when we actually shot the plate, that he would actually look where the stuffed animal was so that his eye line would actually work when we actually put Garfield on the plate. And you can imagine that's pretty hard for the actors going through because they've, don't have their other actor in the shot, and because he's created like 6 months later, so they just have to kind of carry this in their head so that if you watch this background plate coming through, you can just kind of see how Brecken remembered his eye line as he comes forward and is always looking kind of where Garfield was on the counter. We put him there later. Going into the animation phase on the shot, you'll look at just like what John had to remember on set about where Garfield was. Animators will do the same thing. So they're thinking about Garfield's overall performance, but they're also thinking about where John is in the shot too. So not only do you have a gag with Garfield kind of reacting to eating his cat food, but then you'll see as John walks up, you'll see John's eye line going down to Garfield, and you'll also see Garfield's eye line going to John, and it's just something that makes the scene more intimate, and just makes it feel like these two characters are actually interacting with each other and acting together. So then here you'll see the final render of Garfield in the shot, and you can see where lighting on the window is actually working across his back. You kind of see the same kind of highlight that's on John. You'll see the highlights coming in and lighting Garfield as well.
Again, this is where we would take pictures on set to understand what happened. This was actually a set, so it's sort of like a stage where play would be. What we can't see out of frame up here is actually they put lots of different lights actually beaming down here, so the people who are putting Garfield into the scene need to know that, so that the kind of light that's on John's shoulders here and the light coming on here, you can't see, but we took pictures to know that there's actually another window out over here, and so that way we can put light onto Garfield coming up this way, bouncing off the table, and lots of lights from above shining onto his back.
Just Garfield's coat, there's different types of hair in a cat, and maybe Carl can talk about those different types.
Yeah, I mean, on a cat like this, if you look at a section of its body here, we would want them pretty smooth, so you'd see hairs that are pretty straight that look more like that. In an area down in here or in a hind leg, we want the hairs to clump together. Cats' bodies are a little bit oily, so the hair starts sticking together. So we get some hairs that actually start pulling together like that, and so that way we get little clumps. Each one of these guide hairs controls how this happened. On the straight ones, we would have a guide hair, like this guide hair right here, would just say, build a lot of hairs around me that are going in this direction. And a different example would be sort of down in here, we would say, pull the hairs together around these guide hairs so that we get these little clumps. The combination of all those in the different directions, again, you can see the hairs are growing that way, and then they're starting to turn that way, and how they go across these different body parts. We have kind of a cyber groomer who sits there and paints in all these different directions just so we can see how the hair blends together. Cats also, again, we start studying things, back to nature, and cats have different levels of hairs. They have guard hairs, which actually stick pretty far off the body, so they have these quick little sensing touches on their back. And then they have, kind of a downy fur that sits underneath that. To make Garfield feel kind of plush, we actually exaggerate how many of the long hairs there are, so that way he feels a little softer. So again, we look at nature, but then we kind of go a little farther than that, just to make him feel real.
What you're going to look at now is kind of a step that happens after animation called technical animation that basically deals with things like Garfield's, how fat he is, how much his fat jiggles around, and how much his butt jiggles, and just all the hair on him as well. It's all controlled by a group using tools that actually let you basically recreate like what would happen to you if you ran down. You were jumping around on your front porch and all your hair was jiggling around. The same kind of thing. You did the same thing to Garfield. So.
things to watch are like the whiskers on his face up here and how they'll bounce around. You'll see them go from shapes like this to shapes like that and everything in between. And same thing with his belly. If you watch in here, it's going to be bouncing up and down a lot and actually swinging from side to side. So you can just watch it bounce. Especially in there, you can see this. We're trying to give everything weight, trying to make Garfield feel more alive. And in doing that, we want to make it so his skin feels loose. You know, cats in general have really loose skin, a little bit of fat always in their belly. So we really want to loosen that area up and make it feel more alive.
When you're talking about animation, you talk about poses and silhouettes, and basically with the silhouette, you're just trying to convey a really strong feeling of motion, so that basically if you were to stop on any one frame, you would get a feel for what the character was doing. So in this one, if you just kind of crudely block it out, you just kind of see that he's just in this middle of this dance pose.